Who is one leader that's really inspired you, either directly because you worked with them or you've seen them in action? Is there one specifically that has really inspired you?
I've honestly been inspired by everyone that I've worked with. And that sounds cheesy, perhaps, but it's true. And I've been like that throughout my whole life as well. It's like I really believe that everybody has something that they can teach you, something great. And I think it's also important to take care of, and take note of the things that maybe you don't like so much or that you wouldn't want to do yourself. So I've always taken mental notes, in a way, of the things that I admire and maybe the things that I would do differently.
Welcome back to another episode of the UnbrandMe Podcast, the bandwagon podcast that unpacks the lives and stories of entrepreneurs and brand builders to understand how their personal and professional lives align. As we say at Brandwagon, better people make better brands, and better brands make a better world. Marija, you are definitely one of those most positive people in the world, and it's great to see you sprinkling so much positivity in everything that you do. You're a marketing director, a public speaker. You won the Positive Role Model of the Year award in 2024, and you've spent the last 13 plus years helping brands achieve marketing success. You're a wife, a friend, a mother, and so many other things. But who would you say you are?
A motivator.
A motivator. Fantastic. And where does that come from?
I think it just is intrinsic in so many ways. I've always had that. I just want to see people thrive. I want them to feel encouraged. I grew up in a very loving, encouraging home, and I just want to make sure that everybody feels that way. So I just love seeing people succeed.
That's amazing. That's really nice. And we get a lot of different type of answers in the UnbrandMe show, and this is probably one of the key ones which I've never heard. You know, people talk a lot about their curiosity, but motivating is such a selfless aspect to who you are. And I think it's really true. I've read a lot of your posts on LinkedIn. You're quite a prolific LinkedIn poster and content creator. And a lot of what you do is really give stuff that helps people. So if anybody hasn't started following Marija, they should do it straight away. You. But let's just dive back into the very, very beginning. You studied both marketing and psychology, but decided to choose the marketing route. What was it that drew you to the world of marketing at the very beginning?
Well, psychology is in marketing. So I felt like that was a natural path because I could still apply all the psychology that I love and that I was curious about, but make it in everyday products that people consume and deal with. So I felt like I tapped into both worlds.
So you dragged in that behavioral science that really affects the way markets move and the way audiences react.
Exactly.
Fantastic. I always say that, psychology is such an important part of what we do.
Absolutely.
And also in the leadership aspect of your life as well, I'm sure that psychology plays a very, very important part.
Yes.
Understanding people, understanding where they're coming from and how to communicate in a way that makes them or motivates them to get their full potential out.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
It's all about tapping into emotion. Yeah.
You have a really interesting journey. You were born in Serbia. You lived in Botswana from the age of 1, yes. Right? And then you moved to Malta to read your first degree. And now you live in Gibraltar. How do you think your multicultural, diverse life gave you a different perspective to the way you work?
I think that it's just made me incredibly open-minded, for starters, and also very adaptable. I don't struggle to deal with new scenarios. I just take them in my stride, and I look at everything as opportunity and people as equal. So I think those were the fundamentals that were shaped by my expat life.
It's quite an expat life.
Yes.
And I suppose, the colors of the life that you've had, have definitely inspired a lot of what you do now.
Absolutely.
What are your fondest memories of living in Botswana?
Honestly, the community.
Yes.
It was such a great place to live, very, very international, and people did a lot of stuff at each other's houses.
Okay.
So there was that hospitality, that closeness, that community, that relying on people in your space, and it was just such a beautiful place to grow up. Obviously, scenically magnificent as well. Botswana is one of the most exotic and beautiful destinations for safaris too, but it was the community for me. I'm still connected to almost every single one of my childhood friends.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes.
And then moving to Malta when you were, around 18, I guess?
19.
19.
Yes.
How did that change? Like, what was the difference in, living in a very, very small island in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the Mediterranean?
Honestly, in many ways, it felt quite similar. And I think that's why I chose Malta as my choice for university, because it just felt small and safe. It had this positive energy, that sense of community as well. It was just so easy for me to fit in here, to find friends, to feel connected, to feel secure, and to ultimately focus on my studies, which is what I came here to do. So yeah, it was really seamless and it felt like a natural choice. And I ended up staying here for 14 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember your very first impression of Malta when you landed here?
I do. I had never been to Malta before I moved here.
It begs the question, how the hell did you find out about Malta?
Okay, so it was actually because I was exploring potential places to move to where I could continue IB at one point, because I was doing the International Baccalaureate in high school. And Malta was one of those. So it really stuck when it came to my uni choices as well. And I had one contact that I established through a mutual friend from my parents who I spoke to a little bit about Malta, and they solidified everything that I saw and imagined from the pictures. So that's why I chose it. Safety was a huge one for me as well. I was moving very far from home at a time when there wasn't data on mobiles and that level of connectivity in that sense. So that was a big one for me. And I just loved it from the moment I got here, honestly. Just landing at the airport, the drive down. I was living at the university residence in Lea to start off with. Yes, and it just felt great. I think it was the positive energy. People were so friendly. I remember walking from my residence in Lea to the supermarket, getting stuck, asking someone for directions, and somebody actually walked me all the way to the supermarket.
No way.
Yes. So I think that those were the first impressions that stuck, and that's still how I feel today.
That's amazing. And you just got back to Malta now for a quick, short break.
Yes.
So thank you very much for putting this into your diary.
Of course.
What's the impression that you have of Malta today after just a quick, 24 hours you've been on the rock?
Yes, less, I think.
Less.
It still feels completely familiar. Obviously, I have so many friends here. I'm staying in Sliema, where I spent a lot of time too. So familiar. I think that's the way that I would describe it. Of course, like any place, changes come into play, things get developed, but it's still familiar and still warm and still lovely.
Fantastic. It's good to hear. Okay, so let's jump into your career shifts. So you started off working in marketing, no? You worked for Eden Leisure Group, I believe.
Correct.
And then you went agency side.
I did.
And then you spent quite a significant amount of time in beauty, right?
Yes.
As a marketing manager for
brand
manager for beauty brands.
Yes.
How was that, and how was it in those early days for you?
It was fantastic. Eden Leisure Group took me on board as my first role out of my dual master's degree. So I'm eternally grateful to them for believing in me, especially as an expat. So that was fantastic as an entry-level role. They are a very creative company. I had a fantastic manager. The entertainment industry is really fun. So I got to work with obviously a radio station, a gym, a cinema, a bowling alley, really, really fun brands, great team. And then from there, I moved on to the agency side, which was a fantastic experience too. Different ball game, servicing clients instead of marketing internally, of course, as you know. And I got to work with amazing clients too, and a really diverse range of brands. So that built my love for brands even further. And then moving into FMCG was a fantastic step, because brand management in FMCG isn't only about branding from a reputation management perspective, it's also the full spectrum. So you're dealing with the products that you choose to bring in, how those products are then put on shelf. You're tracking numbers. You're working a lot with Excel and movement. It's very tangible. And of course, there is just that building and that connection to the consumer, and how you're going to make sure that they love your brand, that they choose your brand, that they see your brand, and that they build a level of loyalty to your brand. And of course, because I dealt with retail hair and beauty brands, I got to work with companies like Procter & Gamble, and then later Coty, who bought over some of the brands that I was managing.
Okay.
So really learning branding from some of the best companies in the world.
P&G probably have defined branding in many ways,
Exactly.
within the industry amongst some of the other greats. And obviously, working with such a brand, you must have learned some amazing lessons.
Of course.
Like what were the key moments, or the biggest lesson that you learned working with brands like that?
I think one of the most defining things for me was how they approached brand documentation. So brand books, they were so robust, so incredible. And it really teaches people how having parameters in a brand is actually not something that restricts you. Mm-hmm. It's something that fuels your creativity, because those parameters are necessary to make sure that the brand is obviously respected and that every single thing that happens to that brand is within what has been defined, but then everything else is up to you. And it's such a great place to be in, a great space where you can actually then fuel your creativity through that. So I think that's something that I've taken to every company that I've worked at since, making sure that that brand documentation is so solid. And then also the way that they deployed every initiative was really important too, because it was deployed thoroughly to the point where everybody understood the objectives, everybody understood the fundamentals, and then they could run with it. And like I said, also the tangibility, just how important every single decision in a brand is. From where you position something on a shelf, how easy it is for a consumer to spot, to why they would keep choosing you every single time. So yes, those were all lessons that I kept taking forward.
For sure. That's probably the best university of learning how
Absolutely.
to manage brands. Yeah,
yes.
For sure. Amazing. And then for some odd reason, you moved into the gaming space, where you've spent the chunk of your life now for how many years?
Now it's coming up to 7.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
More
7
than
years
7.
ago, branding in the iGaming space is not what it is today, but it's definitely nowhere close to where, brands like P&G or Coty manage their brands. It must have been a real shock for you. Do you remember the first time you saw it? Yeah.
Yes. And the shift actually happened. I was one of the late bloomers in Malta. I think at one point, if you're an expatriate here, a young expatriate, the assumption was that you were working in gaming. And I think most people were a little bit confused by the fact that I wasn't for a long time. And I actually got headhunted into the industry.
Okay.
And the reason for that was branding, because startups were suddenly becoming listed and they needed a different kind of brand, a more refined brand. Suddenly investors were looking at them and there were different considerations to be made. So there weren't really that many people within the industry who were specializing in branding. So I moved into the iGaming space to help a company, Catena Media, to refine and polish their brand and communications. And that was the beginning of my journey in the industry. And yes, like you said, of course, it was being handled very differently. Image banks were not really something that existed. Brand books were one-pagers, more like brand cheat sheets.
Yeah.
So yes, there was a lot of room for growth.
I think also what we see today is that there are a number of brands which have really moved forward. There are a number of brands within the gaming space who have really understood and capitalized on building their brand. And I think in a world where you cannot just rely on SEO, you cannot just rely on your affiliate marketing. Yeah. I think the big brands are winning, and the brands that are really managing their brand properly are the ones that actually survive and last so much longer. They're the ones that stand out, and they're outstanding because they stand out.
Absolutely.
What I do feel, however, within the iGaming space, where we've worked with a number of significant brands, is that sometimes the essence of the brand is actually left out. Where sometimes people talk brand, but they're actually talking design.
Yes.
And I think if you look at, the space of your outside the iGaming space, a lot more effort is done into building and understanding what is the brand's purpose, what are their principles, what is their proposition in the market. Do you think that the iGaming space is starting to mature in that space, and have the brands that you've worked with, are you seeing that there's more importance being given to purpose and principles, especially from an employer branding perspective? What's your take?
I think that progress is being made, and I think that this is an issue that's not isolated only to iGaming.
True.
It is very prevalent there, yes, but I think that people often overlook what the true meaning of branding is. Even some experts,
Yep.
or so-called experts, let's say that, misunderstand those fundamentals. So like you said, many people confuse it with visual identity, and they think that once that is locked in, then job is done. But it's not. Brand is something long-term. Brand is something that is living and breathing constantly and in everything. At the end of the day, it's what people think about when they see your product or they hear your name. And that's what people need to focus on. So yes, it is moving in the right direction, but I think that people still need to also focus on capturing their messaging in the right way. You see it so often, even outside the industry, billboards that have fancy sounding taglines that literally mean nothing. Advertising that has no action points, that doesn't even tell the consumer what they need to do next or what the brand expects from them. Things that convey zero emotion. There are just countless examples. So yes, more work to be done.
About brand definitions, I think my favorite one would be the Jeff Bezos one, which says a brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room.
Absolutely.
And it all comes down to reputation at the end of the day.
Yes.
So, we also say a brand is what a brand does. And there is that long, the famous quote, I think it was Marija Hammon who said it. It's that people will forget what you do, people will forget what you say, but they never forget the way you made them feel. And I think that's a really powerful quote. But I think people misunderstand the quote in the sense that it is what you do and what you say, which enables people to feel your energy, the right, to be in the right place with the brand.
Absolutely.
And the point about, losing out on things like, CTAs, call to action. I mean, for God's sake, put it in there.
Exactly.
What's the point otherwise? So I'm with you over there. You spent the last couple of years now, quite a few years working with Relax Gaming now. And you quickly moved, Relax Gaming, you started when it was still evolving.
Yes.
Talk to us a bit about the experience there and how you helped the brand grow.
It's been an incredible experience. I've been there for just under 6 years. And as you said, I have moved through the ranks. So initially, I joined the company to do something quite similar to what I had done for Catena Media. They were at a junction where they moved from just being poker and bingo into also the casino space and aggregation space. And they needed to build a strong brand within the market so that they could actually push those new verticals properly. And similar type of scenario, there was very light branding in place. So
Really
it was
being polite here.
Yes, it was a modest website, just a couple of tabs, not much depth. It was very difficult to understand what the company did and what they stood for through the website itself. The branding or the brand book was just down to logo, brand colors, and fonts. That was it. There was no messaging locked in. There was no formal corporate identity. And so all of that needed to be put in place. So my first year was spent building the corporate brand, essentially, creating the image bank, the look and feel, the messaging, creating the new website, which is still in place today. Of course, it's been refined since, naturally, along with the brand. But yes, the fundamentals were established in 2019 when I joined. And then once all of that was locked in, I actually moved into a role which was called product marketing.
Okay.
It was a new department that was set up because what we found then was that we had this really strong, industry-leading brand identity, which was even mimicked in many ways because it stood out. But we had materials going out to our customers and to the market from internal representatives that were being done by staff members. So of course they didn't have the same look and feel. And there was also a need for educational materials which needed to be filled. We wanted to create deliverables that were consistent, that were ongoing, that were really highly informative. And so that department was set up to put all of those materials in place. So that offered really in-depth, important information which needed to be shared with the look and feel that we wanted them to have. So that was my focus as the next step. And then I moved from that role into leading the marketing department itself as head of marketing, which was the beginning of my official leadership journey, so to speak. And that was fantastic. When I first joined Relax, the leadership structure in marketing was very flat. We had a head of marketing and then a very small team beneath her. And what we had done then is actually start to build clear pillars. One thing that I was always really set on is making sure that everybody had clear parameters, clear remits, and their own area of responsibility so they could really take what they have and just run with it. I always wanted people to treat their area with expertise and accountability and just treat it really as their own and give it their all. So I thought that that was very important. So we actually ended up structuring into 4 pillars, which we then reduced down to 3. So we have the design side, the general marketing side, and the communications side. And that's how it is today. And over the years, we've made managers and managers of managers. One of my first things that I did actually when I got a head of marketing role is I promoted somebody to a director title.
Wow.
So yes, I have just been that type of leader since day one. If I see that somebody is instrumental to the team, I want to make sure that they are set. And that was my first move. I promoted them to a higher title, a higher salary package than myself because that's what leadership is about. It's about just knowing which steps to take when, having the foresight, knowing what matters, prioritizing, and making sure that the team is in a position and the structure to scale and to thrive.
Comes back to who you are, no? Motivator.
Yes.
I'm really impressed about your depth of knowledge about leadership and
you.
this over and above your depth within the branding space. Structure seems to be something which is really consistent with the way you think, with the way you write, with the way you speak.
Yes.
Where did that come from? Did you learn that, or was it you've always been a very structured person?
I think it's quite intrinsic. I like things to be organized. Even as a child, I was quite organized. I always had all my Barbie's clothes in a specific case. I would collect my toys in a specific way. So I just like that structure. And I think, like I said, I feel that people thrive when they know what's expected of them. It's very difficult when you're in a team where there's a lot of shared responsibilities, blurred lines, where nobody's actually highlighting the vision and what you are going for. What is the direction? What is everybody pulling towards? And what are the tools that they need to make that happen? I think that that's really confusing and nobody really thrives in that kind of environment. So I think that's why I've always wanted to put structure in place and clear remits, because I just want people to feel that sense of empowerment.
And have that clarity.
Exactly,
to understand
have
where
that
they're
clarity, feel inspired, feel motivated. Because even if times do get challenging or there are hurdles, I think when you have somebody or a leader who has clear vision, then you know what you're going towards, ultimately, what the goal is. And even if there are setbacks, you know also that you have the support to get through them and that you still continue going towards that goal, or that you'll pivot together if necessary. So yes, I think the lack of clarity never works.
Yeah, clarity, structure, communication.
Absolutely.
Who is one leader that's really inspired you, either directly because you worked with them or you've seen them in action? Is there one specific leader who's really inspired you?
I've honestly been inspired by everyone that I've worked with. And that sounds cheesy, perhaps, but it's true. And I've been like that throughout my whole life as well. It's like I really believe that everybody has something that they can teach you, something great. And I think it's also important to take care of, and take note of the things that maybe you don't like so much or that you wouldn't want to do yourself. So I've always taken mental notes in a way of the things that I admire and maybe the things that I would do differently. And then I applied that to my own leadership. So genuinely, I have learned, respected, and appreciated every single one of my managers.
Kudos
throughout
to
my
you,
career.
and kudos to them, of course. But I think this aspect that you've got in terms of really trying to absorb what you witness, what you see, what you experience into lessons. You were telling me about one of your first best posts on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Was you went through a podcast and you took the lessons and you really wrote it out.
Absolutely.
So I think that's really interesting.
Yes,
You've
that
also
comes from my avid note-taking.
Yes.
Yes, so that's a little bit of a superpower and a thing as well. I love to take really detailed notes because life moves so fast and there are so many instances where you're like, yeah, what? So I think it's just really important if something is captivating and if you want to learn and make sure that you withhold that information, then take good notes. And yes, the podcast was a great experience because I love podcasts, but I don't always have the time to listen to them as much as I would like to. So in this instance, I listened to a really inspiring podcast, took great notes, and then I was like, you know what? I would have loved to have this kind of solid recap available to me. And so I started sharing those type of things, and I still do. When I listen to a great podcast that I feel other people could benefit from, I do share the takeaways. And it's not in that kind of structured, I'm only going to share one takeaway and leave the rest mysterious. I try to make it a proper, robust overview so that people can learn from it too.
That's fantastic. I'm going to go back to the note taking.
Yes.
Pen or digital?
Both.
Is there one centralized Marija Hammon note-taking space in the world?
Every notepad going. It depends on the moment, honestly. But I mean, if you look at my notes app on my phone, it is full to the brim of ideas, of detailed notes. Same thing on my laptop. So yes, just everywhere. And then, of course, I centralize them.
Do you ever refer back to them?
Yes.
Yes?
Constantly.
Fantastic. It's interesting. I'm a big note taker as well, and I just say that if I'm in a meeting, I have to be taking notes. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen.
Absolutely.
For me. And I've been consistently. So when I started Brandwagon, I declared war on paper, and I said that's it. And I used to love my Moleskine notepads. They used to be so key to me and to part of my life, but. Less is more.
Yes.
So I've always considered just going on digital notes. I've got notes going back to, I think, 2006 in the early days of Brandwagon when, what are the areas that we're going to get into. So if I write down, then it sticks. I do refer to them back now and again, but not as often as I probably should. So it's really interesting. I think it's more about the process of in that moment, just understanding what somebody said.
Yes.
And putting it down for me to remember, even just mentally. I think when you write it down, and apparently physically writing them down actually helps you remember them even more.
Exactly.
But I
feel the same way. For me, it's also part of that understanding and absorption of information, but I think it also always comes down to the sharing bit as well for me. Like I used to share my uni notes with half my class. So
lucky friends you had.
So I think it was down to that too as well. Like, oh, maybe someone else could actually benefit from this. And same logic with the LinkedIn recaps
that's amazing.
too.
That's good. That's good. Good on you. Jumping back into your leadership. You're starting out in leadership.
Yes.
Were there any specific milestones or tough times that you went through which you remember and have made you who you are today?
I think that one of the biggest things that you learn as a leader is that you need to have tough skin. Of course, as a leader, there are times when you need to have difficult conversations, when you need to say things that are not going to make the team very happy, when you have to disagree with something, and you just have to do those things. Those are all necessary parts of leadership. Even if you're the kindest, most empathetic leader, there are those moments when you just need to do those things. So I think that that is a big leadership lesson that people need to learn and that they need to execute. And I think another thing that I would say is that the saying, leadership is lonely, it's lonely at the top, those type of notions, I think it's only as lonely as you make it. Because if you are the type of leader who puts yourself on a pedestal and is very disconnected from your team, then yeah, sure, you're going to feel really lonely. But if you are very connected to your team, if you are a leader who leads with heart, then I don't think you'll feel lonely at all. I think you'll feel more connected than ever.
Mm-hmm. Who do you have those tough conversations with when you can't have tough conversations with your team? Where do you go to for your inspiration or your advice or just to share something which you're not sure about?
Myself.
Yourself.
My husband and my parents. I'm really close to my parents too.
That's fantastic. And I think that really helps because I find, leadership is lonely. It's something I think which has struck me as something which I believe is true because there's some times where, you need to go in there and you need to show the team that you're still passionate and motivated, even when you just feel like having a rough Monday and not getting into work, but you need to lead by example. Mm-hmm. So I think those days where you can really, be honest and be true that, this is not who I feel like being today. I just feel like being somebody who doesn't want to be out in the front line. Mm-hmm. I think it's a true thing. I think just like you, probably my reality is similar. Speaking to myself normally helps.
Yes.
But then I love being surrounded by a number of great individuals, which I call my friends, mm-hmm. who sometimes, throw back my own great advice at me and just shake me up and wake me up.
Yeah.
No matter how tough it's good to be.
You need those kind of people for sure. But ultimately, I think you need to always trust yourself and to trust your gut. Because as a leader, you will be having discussions with people, of course, and people will see parts of what you're sharing, right? Mm-hmm. So like when you're discussing with your friends, but they perhaps won't have every single nuance which mm-hmm. plays a part in the picture. So ultimately, you know the situation best, and yes, you will get advice, and it is very important to be challenged, but you need to trust your gut.
I've heard you mention this quite often in a number of your podcasts or posts. This is something which is like really true, that you've said you trust your gut a lot.
Yeah.
And that people need to rely on trusting their gut. Mm-hmm. The marketing and branding space has become ridiculously statistically driven. There's a lot of research, all the accountants have joined the marketing world and everything must be measured. And whilst I do believe that has, really taken marketing to a completely new level, mm-hmm. I do sometimes feel that there is a bit of analysis paralysis. And sometimes we're killing that gut feeling mm-hmm. and that creative edge, which allows people to be just different for the sake of being different because it helps them stand out. What do you think?
So I think the main thing that you're touching on is that things start to lack emotion.
Mm-hmm. Lack emotion and just creativity for the creative
Exactly.
sake.
I agree with you. I think obviously we live in an amazing time where we do have access to so much data and so many tools. So leveraging that is really instrumental to standing out in the space. But yes, if you become too focused on that, then it can kill that human touch. So even, for example, on LinkedIn, which we mentioned, a lot of people are trying really hard to go viral. They're trying really hard to hack the algorithm, and they know certain things that it could take. And so they try to drive everything in that direction. And in many ways, then it loses touch. Because while you're trying to go viral and appeal to everyone, so to speak, you are not speaking to the people that you need to be speaking to. So your tribe or your audience, your community. And I think it is a dangerous space that we are in from that perspective, because those are the moments that really define a brand. When a brand can create a movement, that's defining. So for example, Nike, I mean, they created an entire philosophy and a movement on a single tagline, which resonated with the entire world. And I think that there needs to be more of that. Brands focusing on standing out in the right way. And that happens when you evoke emotion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that is probably the key thing, people leaving emotions out of it. And I think more than just the emotions, they're leaving out their own identity and their own emotions. Whilst, there's so many brands who look and feel and act and deliver the same. And brands can be completely replicated. Your DNA strand is so unique.
Exactly.
My DNA strand is completely unique. And sometimes I think we forget that is what makes us different. And
Absolutely.
that is who we are. And I, coming back to your own personal branding journey, which is, I stand in the distance and watch you and clap, because I think you've done such an amazing job
Thank you so much.
of creating such a great personal brand, which is actually helpful for people who follow you, as opposed to being an ego-driven type of, account. I think, people forget who they are and what they care about. And that is where the content goes to die.
Exactly. It's so true.
So let's just tap in quickly into your personal brand. And I'm just looking at the clock. And oh my God, time has flown.
I haven't looked at the clock.
Don't worry, I'm not going to scare you yet. But what made you decide to start being such a good content creator and deciding to just put yourself out there? Because many people feel scared of putting themselves out there. What was it?
It was just a pure mindset shift. Honestly, I've spent, as you know, countless years, well over a decade, building brands and focusing on strong communication, focusing on building legacy, focusing on making sure that things hit the mark and that people feel connected to the brand, to the company, to every touch point. And at one point in time, I just thought, on a space like LinkedIn, I'm only talking about things that have to do with the company that I'm working for. So I would only be sharing events that I attended to on behalf of the company, things that I worked on when I got published in media. Because obviously when I started leading the marketing team as head of marketing, I started getting PR exposure, media ops, and then I would share those. But I just felt that I had so many more conversations to have, and that there was so much more to me that I wanted to share and that I felt could inspire other people. So I started doing that. Like I said, if I listened to an interesting podcast, I would share a solid recap to help people. I started sharing my viewpoints on leadership. I wanted to talk about things that were outside of the media ops that I was getting. And so I started to be my own media, so to speak.
Amazing.
And that's what I'm encouraging other people to do. And yes, all of it is down to sharing knowledge. I just wanted to also reduce the gatekeeping within the industry, because I felt like that was something that was there, that it was prevalent, and that I wanted to see change. We can share knowledge even with competitors or people who are in the same sphere without revealing absolutely everything. And together we can all build and grow in the best way possible, and everyone can win. Actually, in a conversation with Laura Acosta, she told me that there's space for everyone at the top. And I really believe that. So yes, it was just about breaking down those old mindsets, stereotypes, and just trying to create a new sense of energy. So that's something that I've been pushing for and trying to inspire in others. And it's starting to happen. I'm starting to see more and more people post and share their stories and learn from each other. So it's amazing.
I think that's great. I think what you're doing is really inspiring.
Thank you.
And it's something that somebody had to do. So I'm glad that you're doing it, because you're doing it in the right way.
I appreciate it.
What is the biggest benefit that you're getting out of it? And why should somebody put themselves out there, despite how uncomfortable many people feel about this?
Because it is a genuine win-win. So I think a blocker that a lot of people have is when they are in a full-time role, they don't really know how to manage company expectations and also share their own stories. But you can and you should, because the company wins as well.
Of course.
People work with people, and that gives so much credibility to you as an individual and also so much credibility to your employer when you stand out as an expert and an authority in your industry or your field. So I really think that people have so much opportunity that they are not tapping into by being held back by fear and unnecessary blockers, actually. So I think that is one. And then, of course, the other one is just that vulnerability is something that people are afraid of. That's why people are so worried about public speaking too. They worry about what people are going to think, what people are going to say, how they're going to be perceived. But the worst possible thing is not doing anything. So it's just building a habit. The first time you might be really hesitant, might do well in one post, might tank the next one, but it doesn't matter. It's about momentum and it's a long-term game, just like building a product brand or a corporate brand. It is compounded.
Yeah.
Every single post is revealing more about you, and people are starting to build a picture. So that happens through time.
Yeah, amazing. Two things that you just mentioned really resonated. I have 100 different philosophies on life, but two of them that really come to mind right now is one, I want to die empty. What that means is that every single idea I have or have had or would have liked to try, I need somebody to go out there and make it happen. There's no way that all the tons of ideas I get every single day, I'm going to be able to pull off on my own. So the more I share with people who have the potential of getting those out. I think those are key. So for me, dying empty is a key thing. I don't want to I don't want to go to the grave with 100 good ideas, which never made it to face. So I think that's important, resonates with you sharing. And the second one would be in personal branding, which is something that I'm spending a lot of more time in the boardroom helping, people develop their own personal brand. I feel like the key thing is define the problem that you want to be associated with. Understand what is it, which part of who you are as a person on a professional level, but also on a personal level, really brings your best to solve other people's problems. And I think if people focus on that, I think then it reveals, it takes away, really and truly, it takes away, all the things that are keeping them back.
Absolutely.
And again, this is something that people learn. Okay, so I think, message out there. I don't know if you had a message out there for people who really want to get out there. And maybe they're not the experts yet. Like, why should they start now?
One thing that you mentioned is knowing what you want to stand for, but I think it's also important to know what you do not want to stand for and what you do not want to discuss. So just identifying topics that you want to be associated with. And in terms of why people should start now, it's because everybody has value to share. This is something that I've spoken about multiple times as well, even in terms of people who are in entry-level positions. I always tell them to leverage their inexperience as a superpower, and that they are, no matter what point you're at, you're always a couple of steps ahead of someone else, and things that we consider just common sense or basic knowledge, that is a gold mine for somebody else. So I think that if you can put yourself in the headspace where you consider what could have been beneficial to you in the past, I think you'll realize how much you actually have to share and to talk about. And even if you make an impact or a difference to one person through the content that you share, that's what it's about. I think that people, like we said, are chasing virality, they're chasing follower accounts, they're chasing vanity metrics. And yes, okay, those are all great benchmarks and identifiers of progress. So that's fantastic. But it's so much more than that. If you have a service, of course, it's about then how much conversion you have from what you are sharing. But if you are just sharing to build up your own brand or stand out as a thought leader or as an authority, then it's also about how many people are going into your DMs, how many people you are actually touching with what you are sharing, and how many people you're inspiring. So there's so many different ways to gauge the value and the success of what you are doing. Of course, you get podcast engagements. One of my public speaking opportunities came specifically from a post that I shared on leadership that somebody felt very connected to and that they felt stood out, and they wanted me on a panel based on that. I also had another podcast opportunity which came from discussing again how I built a marketing team, and they just wanted to deep dive into that. So there are just countless measures of success, but I think it's so important to get your story out there because you can make an impact on so many people with it. And it's a habit.
Yeah.
Learning how to copyright and communicate effectively is just a incredible skill to learn. I think it's the number one skill that you can learn, actually, especially in our field. And if you do want to do personal branding, and then just go out there and share your vibe with the world.
Find your voice.
Exactly. And you do find your voice.
It's true.
You do. The more you do it, the more you actually define and strengthen your voice.
Yeah, for sure. I think coming back to that, I think you attract what you project.
Totally.
So if you're not projecting the right person, you're not going to be attracting the right opportunities.
Exactly.
You're not going to attract the right partners. You're also not going to be attracting the right people. I think every manager, every business leader needs to be out there, show who they are, how they lead, and why it's important to them.
Exactly. You can't do business in another way anymore.
Absolutely.
It's actually not optional in this day and age. You have to do that. People want to understand what the leadership in a company is about, who they are doing business with. They just want to see that side. Consumers actually demand it now. Yeah. And if you're not tapping into that, you are falling behind.
Totally. Okay, I'm going to start wrapping up. But there's a huge question which I really am excited to find out more about, is that by the time this podcast comes out, you would have officially completed your term at Relax Gaming.
Yes.
And I'm just dying to know what opportunities are out there for you, because I mean you're a bright shining star in the industry, and I just can't see can't wait to see how you're going to be impacting the markets out there. So what's next for you?
The next step for me is a bold one, but that's how I do things. So I will be going out on my own and doing my own thing, being a solopreneur, as they say, and trying to help as many companies and people build amazing brands.
That's honestly, kudos to you. I'm sure you're going to be phenomenal. I can't wait to see the brands that you help build. I'm sure they're going to be brilliant. And I think what you really bring to the market here, besides all those years of experience and expertise, I think, as you said, and as you started off, you're a great motivator. And brands and brand builders need to have somebody who believes in them, besides showing them the way on how it's done. So I'm sure you're going to be a huge success.
Thank you.
Which brings me to my final question.
Yes.
The soundtrack to your life. What song would you pick?
Definitely Pharrell Williams, Happy.
I think that song is perfect for you. Absolutely perfect. It really, really fits in with your brand. Marija, it's just been an absolute outstanding podcast. I'm so happy to have had you here. The amount of expertise and experience that you've shared has been really, really good. I'm sure this is going to be a good one.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor, and it's incredible having this conversation with you. I think we could honestly talk for like hours.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's what we should do one day.
Maybe we should just do like a
10-hour episode. But yes, thank you so much.
Thank you,
It's been amazing. Thank you.